And then there is this elite choreographed information that we get from the media, the mainstream media. So I'm able to draw a comparative. And sometimes I can say that this is pure propaganda. The people who I've always known to be experts in these fields of international law, relations, and such, I can tell that I'm being lied to simply because I have other forms of getting information. I mean, there's a time before now when we only dependent on the newspapers that were fed to us by people who are controlling a narrative, and radio stations that were purely on business, dependent on what can sell and what cannot. So most of the things that we were consuming were meant to drive a certain point, so that to galvanize our thoughts towards a certain agenda. Later on to realize that these people were in business. For example, what's happening, you ask the question, what is my feeling of what is happening in the Middle East? It is devastating. If you go and bomb a school that has 180 kids and they die, and then you want to justify that in a statement, it doesn't matter what you say, those kids are gone. It doesn't matter whether you come out and tell me, it was justified, that, maybe it's the other side that killed them. It doesn't matter what you do. Those kids are gone. It is wrong. They don't want to fight in the first place. If you ask those kids, do you want war? They'll tell you no. In fact, there's a narrative that the people of Iran want to fight. They don't. There's another narrative, for example, the people in Israel. What about the political elite who are lunatics? If you ask people in Israel, most of them, we've seen demonstrations everywhere saying that the leaders we have in our countries have become rogue. We don't know the direction that they're taking us. But somehow those demonstrations are masked, so you cannot get to see that. So what is being amplified is what can make you believe in what they are doing. And every other time someone says something, there is a push by the background elites in form of an algorithm. If you open your page, for example, if you're on Facebook, on Twitter, you're likely to see some messages that have a certain agenda, unknowingly to you, that those have been tailored to you so that you can have that mind that someone else wants you to drive an agenda on you. I mean, that is the craziest part that we live in. But thankfully, we have people who can tell us exactly what is happening. Of course, we are friends in every other. This world has become a global village, like they used to say. We have people everywhere. They can tell you that this is what is happening. And you compare that with what you're being told, and you're like, no, this is wrong. But as it is now, the world elites, the political elites have run mad. They are lunatics. They are inhumane. They are everything you can describe. That they don't regard human life as something to be taken care of. That it's easier to wipe you out and nothing will happen because I have the power to do so. It is wrong. It is terrible. It is, I don't know how to describe it, but it is terribly wrong. And I believe some days in the future, I don't know which future I'm talking about, but I believe that something is going to happen and people should not be dependent on an institution or somebody for their survival. That we are able to come out of this, that people should come out and say, you're doing something wrong. I look forward to a time when people will stand up to the United States and tell them, what you're doing is wrong. This is not right. There was a time that the Russia, China, India, they wanted to come together and form a currency of trade. I don't know where that plan went to, so that we are not dependent on the dollar. Because you have to convert. Can you imagine if I want to sell something to a Ugandan, we have to convert our currency into an American currency so that we can compare the value. I mean, that is crazy. But I think in the future we shall do that. I don't know how that future will look like, but I look forward to that future. Thank you, Mizan.
Awesome, and thank you very much, Sam. I love your perspective on some of the issues you're raising, including the aspect of the control of information and including those who are elite and elitists who decide what has to become important and what is not important for our consumption. That's the general public. You also mentioned the issue of the currency, or that dollar, the dollar war, or the war dollar. I don't know how to call it. But let's find out what else some of you think about the conversation. We do have Marabu on the call. And Marabu, good evening. How are you doing, sir? And how do you feel about the whole issue that is happening with the news anytime you flip through the channels, through the newspapers? What do you make of the stories? Marabu? Marabu, the mic was yours, if you can hear me. All right, I guess we don't have Marabu yet, but Sam, allow me to engage you further. You talk about the issue, for example, of having people who are on the ground. They're experiencing these things, they are reporting you to these things. Remember, if you have also read through the news, you realize a lot of the nations that are affected, they are talking about using prosecutorial powers to either arrest or charge those who spread, in quotes, unverified news. What is that all about, Sam? Because you have a friend who, for example, is in Dubai, you have a friend who is in Qatar, you have a friend who is in Israel, but they cannot spread or talk about this news because there are laws that inhibit their spreading or, disseminating of this information. What is the logic or the tactic behind this, Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Mizan. That is part of controlling the media. That is part of controlling the information going around. I mean, when you threaten someone that what they have captured in real time, they don't share it because these people have family out here. For example, if I have a brother who is in Qatar, for example, or UAE, and they're telling me, I'm in a I'm in a bad position, but this is what is happening outside of my house. They capture that and they want to send it to me so that I can see and maybe pray with them because there's nothing you can do, or if there is any facilitation they need to survive. And when you make them fear to share that information to me, that is where the problem is. And that is where the win is for those that are controlling what we hear and what we see. Now, sometimes this is the war. They say that before you win the war on the ground, you win the war of the minds of the people that are following. For example, before this war started, there was the very first thing that the president of the United States does is he goes and gives a statement. He gives a justification as to why they have to go into war. So this justification, immediately that information is shared. After that, there is a series of people who support that. And when you look at it, it is like something choreographed. That there is, I look at it like more of a box, like the kind of comments you see immediately after that, supporting that idea. You're like, this is very unnatural. This is not how the average people are thinking. But somehow you feel like there is a section of the community that are so comfortable with what is happening, which is very unrepresentative of what the common people are feeling or are thinking about. I mean, this war is very unpopular, but sometimes when it is presented to the other part of the world, you'll feel like all Americans are in support of this war. When actually, if you take a poll, a real poll, most of the people from the Western countries, from America specifically, are not in support of the war because there are so many things they want to deal with. One of the strong points that Trump got into power with is that we're going to stop every war. It's America first. All the funds that we are going to gather and the revenue collected from the people will go to the American people. Look at businesses. Look at universal health care. If that is not happening, then they must come up with a strategy, a narrative to justify a war. And then push that narrative through unconventional ways to make people believe that this is something very popular and we have to get into it. That is the worst part of it. So, like you asked, course, people will want you to fear to share real information, and that has happened to most people. But somehow, we live in this digital world. We will somehow get the real truth of what is happening in different parts of the world, courtesy of our gadgets that we have. As much as they can control it, they cannot control it 100%. We'll still have the feeling of what others are feeling or how they're affected positively or negatively by some of these things that are happening.
All right, that is interesting also to hear in terms of some of these things not being very popular, but they end up becoming as if they are the popular opinion of the rest of the public, and that is also one of the struggles I've had, my friend Sam, because in the past few days you realize, depending on the medium in which you are consuming this news, there is almost a no-go zone for you. There are things you cannot mention, there are things you cannot speak about. And that now goes also to when you take the same, in quotes, breaking news, and you want to watch from channel 1 or channel 2 or channel 3, you realize that these things actually are not the same. The way they frame the sentences, the way they frame the headlines, the way they even tell the stories of those who are affected and the way they are affected, it's quite different. One of the biggest struggle I've had, I don't know if you people have seen the same or experienced the same, there is this platform called TikTok, for example. There are things you cannot discuss or have a conversation on because then you are against the community guidelines. But then with the same platform, when people are actually discussing nothing, I don't know if you understand what nothing means, but literally nothing, it is very popular. So I'm here thinking, what are people supposed to consume and what are people not supposed to consume? Are you supposed to consume the unnecessary evil? And when the evil that is actually happening is supposed to be brought to the limelight, then the goalposts keep shifting. Marabu, are you there, or should I proceed having this talk with Sam? Marabu? All right. Do you mind? Go ahead, sir. I love to listen from you.
Well, greetings. I think, first of all, I remember giving you a suggestion to read the book 1984 by George Orwell and to look at the dystopian, speculative, fictional society that he created and how we are sort of going towards that at the moment. And if you try to understand whatever is going on in the headlines or current world affairs, you would be forgiven to think that we are in the brink of World War III, because mostly the information that we get is war, anarchy, and violence. And this is a world idea that we are trying to be pushed to this direction for a reason. Remember when we come out of COVID just the other time, and we had everybody put into a fear state of confinement into bubbles and subjected to involuntary vaccination. And right now we are being pushed to a brink of war. And it is the information or disinformation within it which is more prevalent than actually the factual reporting of the status of world affairs. And at the moment, it is very hard for you to find a reliable source of information, whether locally or internationally. It is very hard for you to find a dependable source that you can quote or that you can believe in. So if we look at the geopolitics, for instance, and we look at what Trump is doing in Iran, some people have gone ahead to call this the wagging the tail There is a book called Wagging the Tail, and it's of a president of the United States where he was caught up in a scandal and he decided to attack a country to push people's thoughts towards another way. Trump himself had also hinted that Barack Obama was going to attack Iran simply because he had failed. So this is something which, if you look at it, is unnecessarily being put into our faces. And you have to wonder why. What is the reason? Why are we being subjected to anxiety? What don't they want us to think about? And it turns out that probably should be the Epstein files, because whatever I'm learning today is that Israel was involved, that Epstein was an agent of the Mossad and conducting espionage within America by the aid of the CIA. And if this is the case, then this is something that probably they wouldn't want the American public to ponder about, and could be somebody's bad manners. You know, many people have called Trump the big baby, that he does and thinks later. And for him, procedure is just a suggestion, and laws are just suggestions. However, we're going to be having a congressional hearing next week whereby they're going to talk about the powers of the presidency to go to war and to subject America to war. And we're going to see what is going to happen on that front. Now, let's come locally and see what is going on. We had a plane crash the other day, and people went back to so many other people who passed and suggested that there is a pattern that is cropping of people dropping from the sky without explanation, and government has not come forth convincingly to give reasonable explanation why airplanes are falling off the sky, especially of people who are perceived to be either neutral or against the administration. Looking at what I've heard about the man Ngeno, may rest in peace, was that he was a firebrand against especially land grabbing in his parts. And the people who are being perceived to be grabbing these lands are currently in government. So once government does not come out with this information, and the only time that government comes out with information is thinking, what are we going to tell the public? What story are we going to conjure to give these people? That is how that's how the public starts viewing the headlines with suspicion, coupled with the fact that we now have an independent fourth estate, especially with Standard newspaper and the Nation newspaper, you know, chucking out elusive headlines that just are unbelievable. When you read the dailies, when you read their e-papers and you see the scandals that are happening, and then you come and hear the government reaction to it, telling you that no money was lost, there's nothing to see here, then you want to feel like there is a certain propaganda being run. But at the same time, this information, whether it is because of the position we find ourselves 2 years to election, that the truth might have to be economically managed. But what we're going through right now, we're being bombarded by a lot of information, a lot of disinformation, not being given a chance to think for ourselves. The facts are becoming more stringed. You cannot really understand whatever is going on. And I think first it is upon the government to give the correct information. If anything, that would be the least expectation of a citizen, that we should have the truth, or if not the truth, we should have at least the right to access information. And these are not started with this administration. We sought to have the contracts of the SGR made public a long time ago, haven't been made public till date. We've sought to have so many committee resolutions made public. They haven't been made public till date, even before William Ruto. So this is about the government being economical with the truth, whether thinking that it is part of national interest or security, but there is a committed effort by the powers that be to ensure that they become either ambiguous or to become long-winded, sometimes not being clear on what their position is or what their interests are. And this leaves the public to speculate. And it's an issue when it comes to issues of conjecture. Then you have a lot of conspiracies, and you find that whether a simple death can be treated like an assassination when it was not, simply because the right information was not given out. So telling the truth, I think, is not part of the government machinery. The truth is not what the government seeks to give the people, because truth is power and truth has to be subjected to accountability. So it's not in the best interest of government for people to know the truth. However, at this time and age, with the enlightenment that Kenyans have, seeking the truth becomes the endeavor of the citizen. And that's how it's going to be. Thank you very much for the time, Ms. Anyan Jabless.
That is, of course, Marabu. Marabu, thank you very much for joining the call, and I appreciate your submission on a lot of issues that you've raised, including the government being very economical with the truth. And you know what they say? That when it comes to truth, it is your duty to be truthful to your government, because failure to do so, it's considered felony. But when you decide not to, government decides not to tell you the truth, they state it to be akin to national security. Let me find out if that's what Western thinks. Good evening, Western. How are you? Great to have you back here.
Hi, Eli. Eli, last time I told you about the.
Before you get to what you told me last time, I've been telling myself this day, Western will come at me with this because he told us. Go ahead.
Yes, I told you the irrelevance of morality and ethics in power politics. I did. And before, I think the space was over, guns were blazing all over the place. Rocket launchers and what have you. That's power politics. It's very raw, unalloyed, impersonal, and it has no room for sentimentality. Just raw and crude like that. So before I get into, look, one has to understand something called ideology. Ideology shapes how we think. The ideas that we receive when we're young, the beliefs we get when we're young, whether it's from your culture, from the school you attended, those things shape your worldview. They shape your reading of your social, political, and economic circumstances. That's ideology. And usually you get your ideology through institutions. And those institutions are usually controlled by the state. How to raise people in a particular society, the state has got usually a word in how that is conducted. You may not know. How schools run, what is taught and what is not taught, what passes for truth, what passes for history, who are the heroes, who are the villains. The state has got a role in that. The media, what the media propagates, what they censor, and what they relay to the public for consumption, that's ideology. So they create villains for you. They will create villains for you, or they'll create heroes for you. When you don't know, they will shape the election for you. That's ideology, how we think. Well, in the Marxist sense, ideology is how you think about your material conditions. And usually the ruling class brainwashes the working class and the masses to imagine that they've got stakes in the capitalist system and that the capitalist system works for them. It's a natural ideology. Tell me you're going to find somebody in Kenya who will have a problem with the capitalist ideology. You'll be lucky to find even one. That's what I mean by ideology. You will be lucky to find one person who has got a soft spot for socialism. You won't get it. Why? Because that's how we have been socialized as a society from the get-go. Even when capitalism is not working for us, it's created poverty for us, it's created inequalities for us, it's contributed to societal fracture, rupture, and chaos. Still, we cling to it. No, socialism will make some people lazy. No, Nyerere tried it and it failed. Ideology. We call it ideology. You don't question truth, and truth is usually imposed to you, manufactured and imposed to you by institutions set up by the state. That's why the media is very paramount in the propagation of truth. They call them regimes of truth. That's what they are called, regimes of truth. If you read a scholar by the name Michel Foucault, that's what he calls it. The ruling class dictates to the rest of the people what to believe in. Who are their enemies? Was Ngeno killed or not? The media will create that narrative. No, he was assassinated. But even when you see that weather is bad, you can see. No, but that thing landed. The pilot had problems. He touched down. Yeah, the weather we can see. And then, how come he went back to the skies? He didn't live there. He came down. No, the media, the political elite that you believe in will tell you, no, that's not the case. He was assassinated. Ideology, regimes of truth. The Standard will come up with the headline or Nation, will propagate the same. This was a tough politician. He was against the president. Like, those are narratives, aren't they? They are narratives. But if you don't know anything about ideology, you go along and against evidence, against what you are seeing. It's the same thing at the international level. BBC, they're now explaining to you why it is in the best interest of the Iranians and the rest of the world that the Ayatollah should be taken out, or was taken out, or anybody like that should be taken out. That no, there's nothing wrong they did. They didn't break any law. They didn't contravene international norms. It was in the best interest of Iranians that Ayatollah be taken out. Ideology, and you believe in it, don't you? Israel, ideology. No, Hamas, they attacked us, but Hamas attacked you. How many people died when Hamas attacked you? Let's even go into the statistics. How many people have you butchered in retaliation? How many? No, you won't listen to that. No. Hamas, they deserve to be hunted down and pulverized. The victims here are the Israelis. They have a right to commit all sorts of atrocities. That's ideology. Ideology. The same media, which has nothing to say about the atrocities in Gaza, in Iran, they'll be vociferous in their condemnation of Putin. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? They will. They'll be vociferous in the condemnation of Xi about Uyghur Muslims in China. No. This cotton from China, they're producing using slave labor. We should boycott. Now, suddenly in China, human rights matter. In Gaza, human rights don't matter. In Iran, human rights don't matter. In Iraq, they don't. Ideology. That's what we call ideology. And they bombard it down your throat. But you've grown up putting America on a pedestal. They can never go wrong. Through the media, they tell you, and Hollywood culture, they're the foremost, greatest country in the world. You've grown up believing in that. There's no way you can contest it. Trump must be right. The people he's hunting down must be wrong, and they must be hunted down. Netanyahu must be right. We grew up attending PPI. It's called what? Some Christian what? PPI? we are told that Israelis are chosen by God. Israel is the land set aside. No, they can't be wrong, even if they kill people. No. They're doing God's work, God's calling. Ideology from the religious fraternity, the Bible schools you attended, the church you attend. Ideology. It's brainwashed you. So you can't read this conflict in any other way. You can only use your religious lens, your religious orientation. And then you bring in and say, these are terrorists. Again, ideology. The media defines for you who is a terrorist and who is not a terrorist. So against evidence, you're going to call, I don't know, Iranians as terrorists, sponsors of terrorism. But if you come and kill my leader, you kill my leader, what are you? That's not terror. Or if you drop bombs in a school and school girls and boys die, that's not terrorism. No, it's not. You won't believe it's terrorism. You won't believe, because if
I beg your indulgence. I beg your indulgence, Weston. I'm streaming this session on a very sensitive website that finds some of those wordings unpalatable. TikTok can be very sensitive, so we might just need to choose a language that can replace wordings such as unliving people. I'm sorry. We still need that audience. Go ahead.
No, but Eli, how else can I say? If people are butchered, what can I say?
Unliving of people. That's what they use. It's not my rules. I'm not saying my rules. I'm just telling you.
No, Eli, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying.
The session will be brought down. That's what I'm telling you. It is not my wish. Go ahead.
No, look, where atrocities are, honestly speaking, you are part of the ecosystem of perpetrators of atrocities if you resort to euphemisms. Let me put it to you correctly.
I am not. I'm telling you, that is the platform. That's the platform. That's their demand. That's their called community
guidelines. No, but I'm not bound by that. Let me put
go ahead.
I'm not bound
yes.
by that.
All right, go ahead.
I'm not bound by that. I'm not bound by that. Let me put it to you. So, look, this is what I'm saying. This is the same things I'm saying. You see, like in Kenya, we're relying on Nation Media Group standard, but we never ask ourselves who owns these media houses. We don't. So, a newspaper that is owned by the Moi family can tell you something about corruption in your society. It can tell you. That newspaper can point to you who is corrupt and who is not corrupt.
Yeah.
A media house that is owned by the Kenyatta family can tell you who is corrupt and who is not corrupt. But don't we take them seriously? We do. But those headlines are ideological. Aren't they ideological? They have nothing to do with corruption or what. They have everything to do with partisan politics. But you're not going to see that. You say, no, they're tough. They're exposing the rot. But who owns the media? The same thing, the problems with BBC, CNN, Fox News. You think those problems are not there in the media in Kenya or other African countries? So African media is interested in public good. There's no one who gives them the position to take and pursue. It can't be. But these things, they come down to something called governmentality. There's a concept of governmentality, whereby through these regimes of truth, we police ourselves. The same way Eli is saying, this platform I'm using, that's we police ourselves. It's called governmentality. You censor yourself. So the government does not have to use violence because you police yourself. You know what to say and what not to say. You know what is truth and what is not truth, and who is it? The truth is imposed on you. So, like in Kenya, have you asked yourself why there's no outrage across the country, despite kids dying in schools under suspicious circumstances, negligence, violence, name it? There has never been a societal outrage against that. You know why? Because the ideology is that the school, no, you don't challenge the school, because it gives you a fighting chance in life. Even if there are bullies in school, do not tell your child to just, to let your child just put up with it. They're going to finish. It's a good school and it has bullies. who could even kill your child. No, the ideology is that let your child hang in there. Let them hang in there. They stand a chance of getting a better grade. Ideology and governmentality. Tell me that these things are not there. They're there. Ideology. You just, people wake up and they'll tell you, no, Ngeno was assassinated. No evidence. Raila Odinga was assassinated. No evidence. General Ogola was assassinated. No evidence. But people follow and listen to those things, don't they? They do. It's called ideology. It has no room for reason. So unless you theoretically read about these things, how they have been theorized before, you just move by the wind, and then you don't even understand what's going on. But the ruling class knows. They know there's narratives that, crafting and selling to the masses. They know them. Elections, wait for elections. We're preparing for elections. Even when you can ask, hey, how can elections be credible when one of the contestants is the one who is running the elections? How can they be? No, because democracy is an ideology. It's an ideology. And it is sold as the best thing, the best form of governance. Rule of law, good governance, democracy. Now, we believe in these things. We do. Even when the evidence shows no, these things are not actually working for us. So who sells democracy post collapse? The US. Now, when you say the US believes in democracy, do they? Do they believe in the rule of law? Do they believe in justice? Do they believe in institutions? They don't. But they will tell you, no, this is a good form of government. Won't they tell you that? No, the US is the foremost democracy in the world. Won't you believe in that? You will. It's called ideology. So, Obed, I mean, you can go on and on. This is a theoretical conversation, and you can't do much justice to it unless just people have had the chance of interacting with these things in the course of learning. If you don't, you believe in American exceptionalism, Americans will prevail during the war in the Middle East. Even when there's no evidence they have ever prevailed in any war, they have never prevailed. They have never defeated anybody. But no, they will prevail. Why? Ideology. Which ideology? American exceptionalism. Which ideology manifests destiny? No, where did they prevail? Did they prevail in Afghanistan? Did they prevail in Iraq? Did they prevail in Vietnam? They did not prevail anywhere. But no, they will prevail. They're sophisticated. They're more powerful. What is that? That is called ideology. It's ideology. Regimes of truth propagated by the media, schools. You saw at Alliance, politicians in Alliance uniform. What does that? Ideology. The Alliance high school, embedded in them the ideology. This is the best school. It's still stuck. It's there. You go, you rock up in Alliance high school uniform. What is that? That's ideology. It lives with you for the rest of your life. Unless you are lucky enough and you come across a class, a seminar, a book, and you start questioning those things. Otherwise, it lives with you for the rest of your life, and you propagate it to other people. Consciousness is the only liberator. Liberator, Eli, I yield.
Wow. Guess we just had a masterclass courtesy of Western. And, I hate to agree with you. What you're saying, most of it, it's really spot on. Especially last week, you talked about the issue of the bully. I will just paraphrase this. And we talked about international law. Well, it's been proved there is none, but maybe there is. 57 minutes after 8 p.m. Kenyan time, almost heading to the top of the hour, and it's already very hot in here. I was smiling at the same time laughing because I know everything Western is saying cannot be challenged just merely. Let's find out what you think about the issue of the headlines and propaganda. Who is telling the truth? And is it really their intention for you to know the truth? Or facts only work when the facts checkers and the facts presenters decide these are the facts? Welcome to the bigger picture on this Monday evening. Obeds is joining us. How are you doing, Obeds? And good evening. Thank you for coming late to class, but that was a great masterclass by Western.
Never in doubt. Thank you, Eli. Because of the same ideologies and problems we're facing today, I've had to suffer because when people are fighting, I can't do the business I'm supposed to do. That's part of the reason why I've been late today. But what Western speaks to actually is exactly what it is. Um, Media is very important for creating narratives and pushing an agenda. And half the time, because there's a tendency, just like church and school have a particular role to streamline and work things a certain way. You're taught and told this is the right way of doing things. This is how to go about issues, and any other logic that is out of what you've been taught, then it's wrong. Sometimes you get punished for speaking or thinking differently from what the general ideology is. And the best invention is the television and big cinema, because it is very important for indoctrination in subtle ways or openly or covertly. In the course of you watching certain things consistently, it's easy to start to believe in the exceptionalism that the Western has spoken to. The fact that these are media houses, they can't be wrong, and the fact that we don't even question what is the motive behind the headline. It's easy because they have credibility, they have a name, they are well established. Look at the Rupert Murdochs in the world. Look at the best media houses. CNN has a propaganda it pushes. You have what BBC would push. And look at Al Jazeera. I'm sure they'll come up with a narrative to suggest that Iran is right, and the attack is wrong. But what do you do as a person who's consuming this information? Do you believe everything you see wholesale? Or do you find time to interrogate and ask questions? Where is this coming from? Why is it this way? And who's intended to benefit? Because the other thing is, you've even seen Kenyans, and sometimes we joke about it, Eli, but a lot of people love gossip. And it's easy to spread gossip because it sounds right. And I think the easiest thing to say, for instance, is the suggestion that Noah Ngeno was, for instance, taken out. But as Weston said, clearly anybody who has a brain would see this chopper stopped for 5 minutes because the weather was bad and then decided to take off in the same weather. That would be a concern. There could be other elements to it, but basic logic would tell you probably bad weather, poor visibility, and because of that, it becomes a problem. But it's easy to believe because politically, it is the correct thing to feel and say at the time. And so, yes, we consume information, but you have to be judicious at a personal level, I would think, to be able to interrogate some of the things you're told. There is so much that is hidden under what looks like what the truth is. You scratch below the surface, you find something else. You scratch below the surface, you see a motive. There's a narrative sometimes that has to be created. Another example is, we know, for instance, that the Mois and the current president don't really necessarily, and simplistically putting it, that they probably don't like each other for reasons best known to them. So when sometimes you see a headline trying to say ABCD and this regime is not doing well, much as it could be right, there's also a narrative and an agenda that's being pushed to indicate that this person has has no capacity to deliver. So what I can say without fear of contradiction here is that narratives are created, ideologies are pushed, either covertly, subtly, implicitly, but at the end of the day, these are private enterprises who are out to make money. And anything like we said today, clickbait, you've seen people create situations where they're saying, create a scenario that attracts people. And because likes today are the best peer pressure, or, number of views is what people are looking for, then anything goes. And there's an old adage that goes, it's not really an adage for anybody who's a football fan and knows, they say, if you write any story about Manchester United, then you can never go hungry. And that speaks to something, that there's an understanding of what people lean towards, what they want, and what they believe is right. And given that perception of the fact that, these are credible institutions, these are credible people, then it's easy. They come with the sense of authority and they're able to push an agenda even when it is wrong. It flies. And not because it is the right thing, but it serves a certain purpose at a particular time. An example is given of weapons of mass destruction. Remember how the thing was pushed around, and eventually, when America got what it wanted, it became obvious that there was no weapons of mass destruction. But guess what? The media has already helped the narrative. Whatever they wanted has been achieved. And so we can't say sorry. And again, the element of, in the way the international system is structured, there is no world government. It's about interest, it's about politics, it's about what is right for us. So if you have some muscle, you flex. And if you're small, you get punished. It is the same way. So the people who own the media, you have to ask, what are their inclinations? Whose interests are they pushing or serving? So what I would say is it's easy to believe everything you see and hear, but it's also upon and incumbent on the persons and individuals to interrogate and question and take your time to understand and get to know what is the cause, what is the innuendo, and what is the interest that's being pushed. Because at the end of the day, when you scratch below the surface, there's always an interest. And I think that's how I put it in life. Sorry if I've repeated anything because I came in late.
Not at all, Obeds. You're spot on. And unfortunately, we lost Sam. Sam was here amongst one of the first speakers. And there's something he had actually shared in terms of when you are in a position to receive news because of the people you love and care about, the first thing you want to know is firsthand what has happened to them or to the issues surrounding the environment. And this is now what becomes my next set of questions, probably to the rest of the room. And if you're joining us, thank you very much for making time to be here. We are having this Monday conversation on the bigger picture, and we're looking at headlines and propaganda. You might want to just look at propaganda and you realize not necessarily all propaganda is bad propaganda. It's supposed to put some certain narratives into perspective in order to achieve a certain issue or goal, maybe for public good or otherwise. But then there is this propaganda that throws everyone into what I will say mass anger, either because you're creating a biasness or you're creating a certain narrative that paints the party you're trying to put into this box to be the evil one. Now, that is the kind of propaganda I want to look at. Maybe from those of you who have the mics right now, I'm going to repeat the question I put out when we started this talk. When you pick up a newspaper or when you listen to the radio or the television set, listening to news or reading news, what interests you most in terms of, is it the headline, the framing, or simply the total story? And Weston, maybe this is a childish question for you, but I'd like to find out your perspective. When you flip on that newspaper, when you go on that TV set, what matters most for you? Is it the headline? Is it the content of the story? Or simply just the wordings that have been used? Weston.
Well, you can't consume the media before you first establish its ideological orientation. That is the prism through which you have to consume the media, through which you read and critically analyze. Whether you're reading a newspaper, a magazine, you're consuming news, a news bulletin, or a talk show program, or some TV person, Yvonne Okwara, somebody has invited somebody to a studio. You must know the ideology of the media house she works for before you can make sense of the interview. If you don't, you won't make sense of the interview. You'll go with sound bites, or you'll be excited because the interviewee is one of your favorite politicians, so you'll be excited. Or you'll be disappointed because the interviewee is not one of your favorite politicians. So if you don't understand the ideology of BBC, you won't make sense of BBC reporting. And they've got great programs. They've got great feature, news stories. Great. But you must understand the ideology. Otherwise, you won't make sense. CNN, it's the propaganda, US propaganda, and they're not apologetic about it. You don't get that, you will just vacuously tell anybody, this thing was reported by CNN, was reported by BBC, was on, I don't know, national TV and whatever. So ideology, do you understand what ideology is? Because there's no single media house that has got no ideology. The difference is CNN would define itself. It's only whether you know it or not. Fox News would define themselves. Sky News would define themselves. In Africa, our media houses don't define themselves, which is the same thing even on social media. They influence us. If you don't understand the ideology, you can't make sense of why they say the things they say, why they write the things they write. You must understand the ideology. How are they oriented? Politically, economically, socially? How? Then you can make sense of what they tweet. If you don't, today you are happy with them, tomorrow you are annoyed with them. The following day you are happy with them. The other day you are calling them names. It's the same thing with the politicians. Why we will insult a politician today, tomorrow is our favorite. The following day, like a seesaw, because we've never bothered to find out what is the ideology of this politician. And when you find it, you are not going to be surprised about what the politicians say. Like Kanjama, the ALSK president. Now people are up in arms. No, Kanjama, what do you say? But Kanjama is not activist. Anybody who has listened to Kanjama, and it's not like it's hidden. He's made very many interviews in the media. He's not an activist. Kanjama is somebody who believes in the law. Go like this, go and report. If you lost, lick your wounds. Try another time. He's not an activist. He is not that kind of a person. So I'm surprised fellow lawyers didn't know him. They didn't know him. Or Kenyans didn't know him. You want him to be what he has never been. No, he can't be what he has never been. This is what he is. Yeah, we never bothered to find out his ideology because Kanjama organized, I don't know, a memorial service for Charlie Kirk, that American white supremacist was taken out the other day. Like that tells you something about that person's ideology. Charlie Kirk was the personification of white supremacy. He hated black people with a passion, and he spoke about it. Now, a black person in Kenya deems it fit to organize a memorial for such a person. Surely that tells you a lot about their ideology. They are conservative. They are reactionary. They are not activist. They are not radical. And he's head of some Christian thing. Conservative, reactionary. They are not activist. They are for status quo. So, like, we vote for people we don't understand the LI. You see, here you can say it's LSK, it's a professional body. But the tragedy is we make the same mistakes when it comes to members of parliament, when it comes to presidents, when it comes to governors. People are very consequential in policy making. We don't really know their ideology. Sisi tutajulia mbele. Tunataka tu tupige huyu mtu kura, akishakuwa member of parliament, sisi tutajulia mbele what he has in store for us. Literally, we give them a blank check. Keep on adding a zero until there's no space for more zeros. That's what we do for them. And they exactly do that. I'm going to award myself salaries and parks and parks and parks. So that's what I do, Eli, when I want to consume. Because propaganda is deliberate. It's a systematic manipulation of information. And where does it take place? It's in the media. It's in narratives, as we put it, narratives. And you repeat those things again and again, and then you shape public opinion. You shape people's behavior. You shape their perceptions of even themselves, until even they start doubting themselves. Are they really themselves? You repeat it. But there's an agenda there. Isn't there an agenda? What do you think why do you think Wamashia just has got one narrative? Well, he never deviates from that narrative because he knows the more you repeat something, the more likely that thing will find traction. That's what it is. You don't deviate. Remember when William Ruto was campaigning 2022, you would think if you tuned on your radio or your TV and he was speaking in Kakamega or in Kwale, you would think that is the same speech. He repeated the same things from one rally to another rally. He understood messaging. You don't deviate. You don't go to Kakamega and say something else, and then you go to Lodwar, you say something else. You go to Kiambu. No, the same speech, same things. They will stick. The voter in Kakamega just understood the same thing as the voter in Lodwar, the voter in Kwale, the voter in Mandera. Then when the time comes, there's something that's ringing at the back of their mind. Hustler, 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 hustler. They will vote. When they vote, they will vote. So it's a mixture of truth, half truth, and then it's emotional. It's emotional. Propaganda is not just lies. It has got an emotional appeal. And you demonize enemies. You completely demonize them. Oh, he's killed this person, he's killed the other person, he's stealing so much money. You demonize. It doesn't matter whether it's hyperbole. People have no time. Iraq has got weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, you run with that. And then there's justification to attack Iraq. You get it? And then you work on people's base instincts like fear. And then sometimes the pride. You know, we people can't be governed by this kind of people. We're superior to those people. White people are superior to black people. So they can't be ruled by black people. This ethnic group is superior to the other. Pride. You appeal to pride. Propaganda. And then what do? You dislodge critical thinking. Somebody in Kibra thinks the same way as somebody in Runda, somebody in Karen. Somebody who studied in the US thinks the same way as somebody who studied somewhere in some rural school who has never left Kenya. Some people meeting in some shopping center in Kenya discussing politics, not any different from professors in a TV station. The same way they are reading their politics. What is that? It's propaganda. It's ideology. That's what it is. Critical thinking has no room there. It's mass production. You've got posters. That's why posters are important during campaigns. A wall from here, I don't know to where, posters, the same posters. What you want? You could just have had 2 posters or 5. No, the entire wall has got posters of one candidate. Mass production of propaganda. And then social media here, the same thing is repeated, you know. You may think many people are tweeting that thing. No, it's not many people. There could just be two accounts. Just regurgitate, rehash the same thing. And then it is trending. Won't it find traction? Repetition until the beliefs stick. Hitler's propaganda person. That's what it is. Just repeat the lie. Just repeat it. Repeat it. People will come around to believing it. Just keep on repeating it. So, Eli, Obed, that is what it is. Some of these things, they are not really political as they are. They're not really commonsensical things. These are theoretical things. And you need the tools to read them. Otherwise, you don't even see them. It's like a magician is seeing things you can't see. Magicians say they're seeing things. So some of these things are like that. If you don't have the tools, they pass over you. And it doesn't matter what level of education you are. You may be a professor, but you can't detect propaganda. You can't detect misinformation. You can't detect disinformation. You can't. You can't pick it out. Why? Because you don't have the tools. You need the tools to be able to do it. Eli and Obed and the rest of the people. So that's what I do. And that's why it's easier for me to tell this story here doesn't wash. What this person is saying here doesn't wash. What that journalist is asking that doesn't wash. You can tell those questions are leading questions. He's propagating a particular narrative. He's guiding this interview to a particular direction of this conversation. The questions are not open-ended. Don't you think the president is corrupt? Like a question like that. There's no room to explain yourself. You have to say yes, or you say no. It can't be like that. What do you think? Corruption seems to be an intractable problem within the Kenyan society. That's an open-ended question. Don't you think this government is corrupt? That's a question that appeals to emotion, eh? It does. There's no critical thinking in the person who's going to respond to that question unless they're aware of that. Don't you think this ethnic group is the problem? That's an emotional question, isn't it? It is. But these people have gotten a lot of development programs. That's an emotional narrative. But don't you see it? All over the country, when these people get on top of SUVs, why do they do that? It's deliberate. Because the masses who come to listen to them have no room for critical thinking and logic. Just mass hysteria. Yes, now we've identified our enemies. Why we don't have jobs. Why we don't have good roads. Goodness. Now we must gang up together and stop those other people. These things, they're not interesting, actually. When you see them, they're not interesting. They're appalling. Appalling because the masses are being used as pawns. It's called false consciousness. They are used in high-stakes political games, cynical games that they don't understand. But they're busy. No, we have got stakes here. When this person becomes president, now the job that I've been looking for the last, 5 years, I'm going to get it. They realize, no, there's no such a thing. That job is not coming. It's not coming. The amenities that they've been yearning for since independence, they are coming. No, they don't come. They're not there. You still have got muddy roads. You have no lights. You have no good schools. But the person who was campaigning told those things. You'll even have breakfast. Every other person, every other family in Kenya household, I think somebody campaigned like that at some point, will ensure that there's breakfast and eggs and water. How are you going to ensure that? But it's emotional. People will vote for you over such vacuous promises because there's no critical thinking. I see it. It's happening in the run-up to 2027. I don't know whether you're seeing that. I yield.
Let the music play. You're listening to Court FM. Let the music play. To advertise with us, reach us via the email marketing@courtfm.co.ke or call us on 0714 308 277. Court FM. Let the music play. The Bigger Picture with Obet Oriku and Likuyani Eli. For more information, visit www.mizani254.org. Mizani 254, where the scales of balance are restored and meaningful conversations thrive.
All right, quite a submission there. Obes, I know you were laughing because someone here is telling me at this rate, I think imebaki Western atulalishe chini atuchape viboo kila mtu moja moja and then we can be saved. Western, that was a little bit heavy, too heavy to consume for the night. Obes, I saw your hand was up. I'll give you an opportunity to speak to us. Go ahead, sir.
Far from what Western is saying. And if you want to see exactly the argument that he posits is, look at how we behave. Have you seen people who you tell Prophet Award and how they believe in everything that he says? That sense of indoctrination is exactly what we're talking about. It is how you are able to create a narrative and push an agenda. And once people identify with it, whether emotionally or they feel like they are part of it or they can relate to it, you have no chance against them. And especially when there's groupthink, it's always us versus them. That's how you create a cult. Because once you isolate and say they are targeting us because we have a different agenda and are different from them, then it becomes us versus them. And this is part of the problem that we have. We don't want to, whenever people think differently and ask questions, they're deemed to be stupid or mad people, because how can you disagree with a majority who are right and individually you're wrong? So for me, I think there's much more to be done, not because and again, it's so hard to educate the masses. There's that general belief that a majority of the people are not the smartest. And especially when you put them in a group and emotions are high, and it's a situation where there is competition, Eli, that's how we create narrative. And the person who came up with media in the form and structure that it is, and you're better placed actually to even confirm this, Eli, had one very clear thing that there's a way human beings think. And people don't want to have the stress of overthinking issues. If you can do it for them and break it down for them, then you solve their problem. So it's easy to control people if they don't have to think. You tell them, this is what I've found out. This is what I know. This is a discovery. They wouldn't interrogate. Half the time, whatever you say goes until they get a rude shock that what they know has been wrong. Let's say, for instance, for far too long, there are people who believed um, that some people are untouchable, some people won't die. And unfortunately, an example is the Enigma. You know, there was a total sense of thinking he was immortal. The story given at some point was Oginga Odinga would turn into bees and whatever. And people bought that story. So you see how easy it is, Eli, to sell something, even when it doesn't make sense. You have to be able to question what is. But then again, when it's so hard, indoctrination, and that's where the church
Obeds,
comes in.
without
That,
derailing your point, I think I want to pick on the issue you've said. And Marabu, I know you're on standby. I'll come to you in just in a few. You talk about the issue of the Enigma and the way he was untouchable and immortal for that matter. To be honest, growing up, we had these stories. In fact, a story is told that there are people who decided they wanted to one day to go and visit their gods. And when they did that, they were given a mirror saying, now call the person you want us to send to Sayuni. And this gentleman appeared showing the back. And they told, huyu hamwezani naye, wachana naye. Anyway, on a serious note though, these are stories that are created and people flow with them. Some of them for very ulterior motives, but some of them to create the aspect of fear and supplication. I know I'd already asked the question about what comes to your mind when you flip through that news article. Do you read the headline? Do you read the content? Or do you just look at the wording? And I like what Western has spoken about, the issue of trying to understand the ideology of the media or the medium you want to get into before you can even consume that which they are selling to you. Because at the end of the day, they are selling a product, and that is news. They are using either your emotion, your attachment, or your belief system in whatever they are trying to trade off with you. Marabu, I know you read a lot. I know sometimes you also criticize a lot. I would love to find out, if you take a newspaper article, what is the first thing you do? Do you read the whole story? Or do you just read, like, I know a friend of mine, again, I have to say this, yeye anaturushianga headlines, mumeona hiyo? And I'm thinking, dude, fine, tumeona, so what is it in that? And I'm thinking, Marabu, what is your religion?
Eli, you're throwing strays. I'm going to report you to that friend.
There's this friend of ours. All right, I take it back. Edit it. Please edit that part off air. All right, to you, Marabu. Marabu?
The last headline on the Standard was fearless MP dies. And such a headline, you cannot just look at and go mind your other businesses. So it depends usually on what they put there. I mean, if I see an headline like the lying president, that is nothing new to me, so I wouldn't spend much time, going through that. But there are some headlines which would really pull you and urge you to immerse yourself in it. So how I interact with the newspaper, usually these days it's e-paper. You do it online because we no longer buy the physical bit. But a good thing with the e-paper is that on one page you can sort of see all the trending stories, if I may put it like that. So you kind of have a 360-degree view of the entire newspaper just on your phone, and you can sort of be choosing which article you want to read. However, let me say this, Eli. You become amused, and if you're not conversant with what has been happening, especially with history and with the trend. So we had philosophers talk about what we are going through. You know, John Locke, if you read his book on the two governments, and he tells you that the greatest fun for an emperor is to see across the wall and see that the people are divided and fighting, because he knows that when these people unite, they will climb the wall of his castle. So our editors, our journalists are professionals. They've been educated, they've been schooled. And you want to tell me that these people just come up and conjure styles and say we are going to propagate propaganda for what end? If you look at America, for instance, we have two groups of media. We have the Trump deranged media, which is the MSNB, the ABC, the CBS, and then we have the Fox and the rest, which are pro-Trump. But all these are professionals, right? If you look at somebody like Jimmy Kimmel, or somebody like Stephen Colbert, they don't come up with propaganda against Trump. Trump provides them with a fodder to run the stories for their newspaper. What you see is propaganda, is actually blunders by the president. What you see as media propaganda against Ruto might actually be Ruto blundering and just the media putting it out in the open. I don't think that the media would have something to write about if this person was doing something great, if Shah was working, if the police were not killing people. What would the media have to write about in terms of propaganda? So actually, this governance gives the media itself the fodder and the material to write stuff about them. If people are not falling out of the sky with planes and the government's not coming out with concrete statements and explanations, nobody would be coming up with propaganda on that. So sometimes it is the failure of the ruling class, the failure of the institution, the failure of government that gives this rise to this propaganda. It's not as if these journalists who've spent 4 years in journalism schools and have signed to the ethics of being proper journalists come up with stories just to belittle a government. I don't think that is it. It has to be more than that. So a failing state, like how John Locke put it in the two treaties of government, a failing state has more despondents, has more correspondence, has more stories to be written about. There's more propaganda to be created. But a functioning state, you'll find very less things to complain about or to write home about that the citizenry will actually take serious. So the creation of propaganda itself arises from the failure of the state or the failure of the government to meet some of its obligations. That's creating an environment whereby stories can be sown and fed to the public and be believed, right? Why don't we see these things in Switzerland, in Netherlands, in areas where the government is so workable? Let me put it that way. Why do we see propaganda in areas where our government seems to be failing? And why do we see almost lack of it in a dictatorship? When you go to Tanzania, when you go to Uganda, you don't see as much newspapers, talking about the presidency. Why is it that in a pure dictatorship, then you don't find the same? It means that this is an equilibrium between the freedom of expression and the lack of it. And that is where the propaganda lives, in the middle of it. Because lack of it at the same time also shows suppression, which we don't want. More of it also show prevalence, which we also don't want. So having this balance between storytelling and creating perception and selling propaganda and selling ideologies and balancing it with freedom of expression, of speech, freedom of the media, and also putting governments in check is the biggest challenge. However, like I said before, governments are not here to give us the truth. It is about the people to seek the truth. At no point will the government come and tell you that we have Israelis being given land in Kenya. It's not going to happen. It's about a journalist going out to seek it. But once these journalists are sorted out, are we then to say that since we don't have evidence, then this thing does not exist? When sometimes the lack of evidence in itself is the evidence that something is happening. So it's really a catch-20 situation, which propaganda sometimes feeds the masses, but sometimes is essential to show that there is freedom, to show that there is accountability, and to show that there are people within the nation who have their own free will and free mind to conjure, to come up with stories, believable or not, but still stories that fill the lacuna that the government fails by not giving the correct information. Thank you very much for the time.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much, Maribu. You talk about the informational gap that exists, and of course, trying to bring to life the issue of accepting accountability to happen. But then that issue of accountability uh, depends on how much rage people have. And probably that brings me to our last part of this conversation. And if you're joining in, don't worry if you missed out, you can always go back to the replay, which is available on our streaming platform. That is courtesy of Mizani 254 and Court FM. We are live on www.kotfm.co.ke. You can also watch this live on our broadcast through the Mizani 254 and available also on YouTube as we speak for the moment. Now, Obed, today was all about the learning, and I hope you've learned one or two things. But then I would want to ask you, even though you are my co-host, when we talk about the consumption of news, when we talk about the headlines, when we talk about propaganda and the truth, people are hungry every single day looking for information. And when you have hunger for something, there's a possibility that anger can also be part of that thing. Do you believe the longevity or effect of a news article or a headline is determined by the anger that the mass is consuming or is receiving from a particular story? And if that was the case, then how then do we stop focusing on the anger and focusing on the detail of the issues being raised? Because a lot of us, I will say, have made some good or bad decision because they were angry at an article that was focusing on the non-issue. Maybe it's very not as open as Western would love it, but I'd love to find out, Obed, how do we calibrate
So,
this system?
is this what you call rage baiting, or just like
Probably yes, something close to that.
so? There are two ways for me to look at it, and first is who wants you to get angry, because probably the art, like the story, the headline, 11 billion lost and unaccounted for. That's the headline. But when you read the details, you see there are some steps that have been taken and there's some information. There's a different aspect to it, but the headline is making a lot of noise. And then if you just look at the headline and that's the intention, you believe what it's saying. But when you go into the content, then you realize probably there's much more that needs to be worked on to make this believable, or there are steps that can be followed to ensure that all this information is confirmed to be true or not. The other bit would be you as a person, what's your state of mind and what you want at that time, so that if you're looking for that and you get such a story, then you fly with it. For instance, if you're aligned or people are aligned to a certain political group and a story is said about the other opponent obviously it will gain traction amongst the people who don't like one person. For instance, Wamunyoro today, if there's a story that's painting him to have done something wrong, and remember when we were being impeached, the story going that, he treated the family of his late brother in a certain way and took their property and stuff like that. That becomes fodder for the people who oppose him and don't like him. And today, anything that is said about the current president and the regime, whether true or not, then it assumes to create anger amongst people who don't like him. So yes, it is possible. But again, Eli, it's easy to get angry because if that's the intention, it's so easy to be beta to get angry. But it takes a step back for you to think and ask, like Weston said, actually, what's the ideology of the grouping? Whoever has put this one, what do they want to achieve? What is their modus operandi? So that then you don't have to get angry. Get the content and the detail, try to analyze it against the reality. You're able to come up with what it is. But if you just bite to what has been given, then they've achieved their goal, because if anger is what you're looking for, you'll find it in an article that actually meets that. There are places Shai is working, there are places it's not working, but always we never get the whole picture. You get half information, some true, some not. Some situations are probably a negative to do with the fact that the system, probably the setup and the way it operates in a certain area it's not at optimum reasons. Maybe the capacity of the people who are working in that space are not able to deliver as should be. So you don't get the full picture. You're given half the picture. I hope I've answered your question, but in my view, totally, just like if you're looking for something to make you angry, you'll find it. If you're looking for something to make you happy, you will find it, depending on where you are, what's your disposition. And whoever that is writing the information, whoever is giving that news article, also feels they have achieved, because if there are more eyeballs, Eli, for a news bulletin, if there's more traction in terms of selling more newspapers because of the headline, then they've achieved, because these people are in business. So one of the agendas is to sell more or get more attention, get more clicks, get them to trend, and they are able to sell. If you think about it, Standard Group at the moment, it is said that they are struggling financially, and there are reasons to it. And for that reason, anything that will probably sell them would make sense. And if you look at the flip side of it, is they also have an agenda to achieve. They have an axe to grind. So quite a number of things. It is you, the individual who's consuming the information, who has the responsibility to determine whether there's credibility in what you're reading. And if it's not, it's rage baiting. That's what it is. So it's for you to decipher and leave it. But because the masses sometimes go with the flow, and that's where politicians will always win. That's where the media house will always get to direct you a certain way. We are sheep, we follow, and it works.
Obeds, sheep do follow. I don't know if it's the shepherd, but how I wish you would have said, and a good example, and said, for example, Court FM is financially struggling. Why are you using other people who are not here? Do you have good lawyers?
I'm not marketing them. I'm not marketing them. I'm just stating a fact.
I don't know about that. Those are your facts, not mine. Your opinions also are welcomed. I want to read this because this was a subject for conversation in one of the groups I'm inside, Western, and we have slightly 19 minutes to call it a night. So maybe we take a very quick bite on this. And I want you to tell me, what does this article make you feel, or how do you respond to this and why? And by the way, if you're here, I want you to also, maybe in the chat section, to answer this short question. Please, just try to contribute so that we know we are talking to people and not some bots. The question here is, what makes you react to a news article? The word there is very specific, react. What makes you react to a news article? You can just answer with your question, rather with your answer and probably a short explanation. And now, Western, this is for you to listen and then answer me. Then I'll tell you why later on I read this out. SHA announces nationwide digital health system downtime following major platforms failure. Western.
Pardon? I've heard that excerpt. What next?
Yeah, I'm just reading this and I want you to look at this as a news bite that you've come across and then probably try and contextualize it as a recipient of this news or as a consumer of this news. What comes into your mind? Please, there's no wrong or right answer. SHA announces nationwide digital health system downtime following major platform failure.
Nationwide what? Digital what?
All right, I'm going to read this again. SHA announces
Yes.
nationwide digital health system downtime following major platform failure, meaning they had a downtime with their system, so they were unable to process one or two, transactions with the system. Remember the issue of SHA and how it has been a thorny issue amongst the users of the system. What comes into your mind if you are Kenyan who is concerned about healthcare?
No, there cannot be one thing that comes to mind. But what comes to mind is the persistence of this health system to take off.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, it was marketed, publicized, sold as an improvement to the previous system. And technology was a big thing and should be a big thing. So that inability to run countrywide, surely that affects delivery of health service across the country. And you just shudder to imagine what the consequences would be. Because in Kenya, for some bizarre reason, Eli, we practice medicine differently. Because this is technology, I must tell you. And if technology fails, that doesn't mean you can't attend to patients. But in our country, patients would be left there writhing in pain because technology has failed. Well, medicine, if it is practiced the way, let me say it ought to be, I'm using the word ought. The failure of SHA platform should not impede delivery of medicine to patients who are in hospitals, because it's about pay, affordability, and what have you. But human life, you can treat a person later on, you can talk about pay. But if this person, for some reason, because of negligence, the person passes on, then what can we do? So I'm saying this is technology. SHA was supposed to work more optimally than its predecessor, NHIF. But as is usually the case, technology does fail. But I don't think we should fetishize technology at the expense of medicine, because we have practiced medicine historically. Even when we didn't have this modern technology, we have practiced medicine. People have been treated, diseases have been cured. So that would be my reading. The challenges, they call them teething challenges. I don't know whether they're teething, but I will say, okay, they're still struggling to get the thing moving. Perhaps once in a while, even the most sophisticated, forms of technology do fail. They do fail. But the patients who are at the hospital seeking medicine, seeking treatment, don't keep them there. Don't keep them there waiting. Don't send them back home, because the system is not there to identify them. The system is not there to tell whether they are SHA members or not. Treat them. Treat them. That will be my take. As just to add on to what previously other was, is it Obed? So yeah, no, it is Marabu. Look, it's not just an ineffective state that has got reason to engage in propaganda and disinformation and misinformation. In China, you would be hard put to identify what is fact and what is not, because the information is highly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party for obvious reasons. But it's a capable state, highly effective, in fact, more effective than the American state. As we speak now, the Chinese state is the foremost effective state, highly capable. The Chinese political elite sit at the topmost point of this power equation globally. They don't shout about it. That's the thing you wouldn't notice. They don't shout about it. They don't talk about killing people like the US Secretary of War. I like the way they call them the Secretary of War. Don't lie to us, it's Secretary of Defense. I like the way Trump has renamed this department, Department of War, because it's a killer machine. It's been killing people over the years, since time immemorial. So call it what it is, Department of War, Secretary of War. They don't shout like that, but they know their story. They know their game. Hitler's Germany was a very capable state. For some people might have seen this car, this iconic car that is, you can see its remnants all over the place, all over the world. Volkswagen Beetle. That thing came into being under Adolf Hitler. It was the poor man's car, very popular. Poor man's car. It was all over the world. It's still around. Hitler's German state, highly, highly capable. He helped Germany overcome the Great Repression. North Korea, there's a lot of propaganda in North Korea. It's a closed state. We don't know what's going on in North Korea. We don't know. Sometimes where there's famine, people are starving to death, and no, they are not. But it's a highly capable state. If you want to know, it's a highly capable state. Trump will not dare do the things he's doing in Iran to North Korea. He will dare not do those things. Why? Because he knows it's a highly capable, sophisticated state. But information, we don't know what is going on in North Korea. North Koreans themselves don't even know what's going on in their country. It's filtered. So it's not true that only wobbly, dysfunctional states need propaganda. It's about ideology again, Obert's ally. What ideology do you want to hammer home? Do you want to mobilize your people around? That's what counts. And some ideologies are transformative. Some ideologies like Nazism is destructive. Fascism is completely destructive. To some people, democracy as an ideology is a good thing. Can mobilize people around democracy. It's a good people to rally every other person behind that ideology. If you're a transformative leader, it's for the greater good, for the common good. So that you don't want people to script to talk the land good. At the point you're making the stand, after you're gone, like Lee Kuan Yew, you are way gone, dead. Singaporeans who are born later, they can realize you are their best interest at heart. They may not have lived under your reign, met you, but they can learn about you in books and say, wow, we are the founding father called Lee Kuan Yew. Surely he thought about us long even before we were born. That's what it means. And you can never transform any society without an ideology. Get it clearly. What only counts is what ideology do you have as the operative principle? That's the question. An ideology of ethnicity, because ethnicity is also an ideology. In Kenya, we say, no, we don't have ideology actually. Ethnicity is an ideology. As the principle, in quotes, it's not a principle.
Just to be sure, are we having problems with the Western's line, or am I the only one suffering from the blips? Obeds, anyone there? Can anyone hear me?
Can they hear me?
Okay, kindly
We
proceed.
can hear you, Western. There's a bit of a buffer,
Yeah.
but there's a buffer, a bit, but it's okay. We can hear you clearly.
Probably you can just make
Okay.
your closing remarks on the same.
But I mean, those are my closing remarks, Obed. So, Obed, as I close, let us not fetishize technology. Going back to the SHA thing, let's not. You can run a highly effective state without taking people through the rigmarole of technology. An expensive venture which adds on to the cost of what is substantive medicine to people. So let's, for those of us who aspire to occupy public office, and well, please, let's not fetishize technology. Let's serve people. Let's recognize life and uphold the sanctity of life. It's been a pleasure, Eli. This was a highly theoretical conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Weston. Always a pleasure having you here. And, as you say, very theoretical, based on experiences, and what would cut for one person might not necessarily be for the other, especially looking at headlines and propaganda. There are people who like when it screams, there are people who want it subtle, and some of you just want to look at the details. Leo, great to see you here. Japonji, the real Joe, among others. Thank you so much for making time to join us this evening. Hillary, your first time to be here, but great that you've sat through the conversation and listened to the presentations. Marabu, do you want to give your final remark?
Well, I don't mind if I do. So, what comes into mind when I hear that SHA is cutting down on time because of technological issues? First, that easily for me just confirms that must go has to go, because this is a very expensive system that was propped up to be the panacea of our ailing health system. And people do not expect excuses, considering that they were not even consulted before this system was brought on board. People expect it to be functional because you told us that you know the problem and you have the solution. So your solution cannot be worse than the problem. So that in itself just shows how the system itself is just failing. And that cannot be part of propaganda. If it is a fact, we must really stop looking at everything as propaganda. A fact sometimes just is a fact. And if a system is failing, it's just failing. What the journalist is just doing is reporting ethically the truth that this system is not functioning, right? And if, for instance, Western is to talk about China, we have to now look at the intricacies of the unitary communist state and understand how propaganda is really managed by the state. You know, you cannot tell me that China is working. It's not. So the propaganda there is a state-controlled propaganda mechanism, and it cannot tell you anything that the state does not want you to know, right? So I would consider that as a unitary one-side propaganda. You know, what must go, what Trump is aiming to achieve. You know, if you look at the truth telling, truth only concerns he who has care for it. For instance, very few Kenyans might know that the Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. Very few Kenyans might know that the Stretch of Hormuz is about to be closed, because this truth to them is irrelative, does not affect them in any way. But I feel that I am more reactive to the truth that touches my life more. Something like SHA, something like the funding model, something like housing levy. That one touches me more. That propaganda that is about something that affects me tends to be more emotional for me, such that information that does not affect me in any way is less of a bother for me, if I might put it that way. So most of the time, information that directly impacts my day-to-day living, therefore comes and really bothers me. And that's what I take into heart more. So for me, headlines, propaganda, who's telling the truth, like I said, I don't think that a system can be founded on truth, a system of governance that is. It can never be founded on truth. Secrecy is the epitome of governance, but it's up to the citizen to seek the truth, because the truth shall finally set us free. Thank you very much for the time, and God bless.
Eli, I always see media houses, um, any outlet, the way I look at human beings. Every human being tries to show their best foot. They put their best foot forward. They give you an impression that they've mastered it in life. Everything is working for them. And the picture they give you is the headline, that which they want you to see. They will hype themselves when things are going well, but you'll never see when they are struggling half the time, unless it's so bad. When they come to you to ask for help, they never tell you. So the truth really is dependent on who. First, you, the person, or the person, the human being who's trying to impress others. They know the truth that they're dealing with, but they also know there's a truth they want to sell so that they look like they're doing well. And it's the same way media houses operate. Their business is intended to make money, and that's their truth. For you, your truth is what you're looking for. So it's up to you to think and look through what is being presented to you. And if you're looking for information to bastardize other people, you'll get it. If you're looking for good news, you will get it. It depends on what you're looking for at a personal level. And that's the truth that you're dealing with. Thanks, Eli.
All right, asante sana. I mean, in conclusion, there's a lot of stuff that we have learned tonight, and notwithstanding the issue that's happening across the globe, we must be alive to the fact that headlines and propaganda sometimes are not necessarily the facts or either the truth about issues. So it's incumbent of you to go out there and be a truth seeker. It's exactly 22 hours. That means our time is up, but we'll be looking forward to having you in the next one. Assignment. Please, when you read that news article today or tomorrow, ask yourself, what is the fact and the truth about what I'm reading? And whose agenda is being propagated? By the way, some people just love chaos, while others just love making others miserable. But there are others who love peace. I wonder, who are you among them? Because I saw someone celebrating, sasa hii ndio ile vita ya tatu, kaende kaende. And I'm thinking, dude, the cost of war is more expensive than the cost of actually having a normal operational life that everyone is given a chance to be where they want to be. Thank you very much for all of you who joined. We'll be seeing you in the next one. This has been a great conversation in the bigger picture tonight. We've been looking at headlines and propaganda, and with a lot of respect to all the speakers that made this possible. Western, thank you very much as always for being here. Marabou Stokes, we did have Sam earlier on. And of course, without forgetting my co-host, Obed, it's always a pleasure. If you are feeling bored and nothing more interesting to do in your evening, don't worry. I'm still here until midnight. So you can join me on the main broadcast, which is happening on Kot FM. That is kotfm.co.ke. You can also continue watching this live through the Mizani 254 broadcast. That is the video link, which will stay on. And have a good evening. And don't do anything that we wouldn't do ordinarily. Kwa sababu some of you mumezidi sana. Good night.
You're listening to Kot FM.